It began with a folder that shouldn't have existed, a water-damaged envelope recovered from a sealed storage room beneath a decommissioned NATO facility in Belgium. Inside were 5 reels of degraded microfilm, each marked with the same cryptic insignia: an eagle without a nation, clutching a broken key. The contents were fragments of reports, field transcripts, and faded reconnaissance photographs dated between 1945 and 1959, references to operations that were never logged, units that officially disbanded, and missions erased from every Allied and Axis archive alike. When analysts tried to cross-reference them, every mention returned the same notation in red ink: access denied, compartment nightfall. What follows is a reconstruction from those lost files, assembled from surviving documents, declassified intercepts, and personal testimonies that were never meant to surface again. Chapter 1: The Vanishing of Operation Nightfall, April 26, 1945. As the Third Reich collapsed under the relentless advance of Allied and Soviet forces, a small detachment of American intelligence officers departed from a forward command post near Aachen. Their orders were written in code and delivered by hand. No signatures, no insignia. The mission designation read only Operation Nightfall. The team's objective: to secure a research compound hidden in the Harz Mountains, reportedly tied to advanced weapons projects under the authority of the SS Technical Branch and overseen by General Hans Kammler, the architect of Germany's secret armaments program. The 8-man unit was led by Major Robert Ellison of the Office of Strategic Services, a veteran of intelligence extractions in occupied France. His men included 2 engineers, a demolitions expert, a translator fluent in Polish and German, and a communications officer trained in encrypted field transmissions. According to fragments from an OSS logistics manifest, their convoy consisted of 3 M8 Greyhound scout cars and a single Dodge command truck, all stripped of markings. They crossed into central Germany under the cover of darkness, moving along secondary forest routes toward the coordinates listed as Sector E12, Oberharz. The compound, later identified by locals as the ruins of an industrial mining complex near Clausthal-Zellerfeld, was already under intermittent artillery fire. The 104th Infantry Division had reported heavy German resistance in nearby towns, but intelligence suggested that the SS detachment guarding the site was not regular infantry. Eyewitness accounts from captured Wehrmacht soldiers described them as engineers in black uniforms, armed but intent on destruction, not defense. The site itself was said to contain experimental power units and classified equipment transferred from Peenemünde as the Red Army advanced. At 03:15 hours on April 27th, Ellison's unit transmitted their final clear message to OSS command: target secured, commencing recovery procedures. Unidentified apparatus located in sublevel 2. Resistance neutralized. Comlink unstable. What followed was a burst of static, and then one short coded transmission that analysts later deciphered as Die Glock active unsealed. Passageways. The phrase would become the center of decades of speculation among intelligence historians, but no further transmissions were ever received. When US infantry elements reached the Harz region 2 days later, they found no trace of Ellison's men or their vehicles. The mining complex had collapsed inward, as if detonated from below. No human remains were recovered. Only a handful of documents survived, found in the rubble of the command truck at the forest's edge. Among them, a charred page from a technical schematic stamped Heereswaffenamt, Prüfstand 12. In the upper corner, written in faded pencil, were the words Time Exposure Protocol. The meaning remains unknown. In 1946, the US Army's Counterintelligence Corps launched a quiet internal review of the incident. The investigation was classified under the code SHAF Int 2045C and later refiled beneath the Atomic Energy Act of 1952, removing it entirely from public record. Witnesses who had been stationed in the area were reassigned or dismissed. Families of the missing operatives received standard casualty notifications marked killed in action, unrecovered remains. None were given further detail. Ellison's personal effects, reportedly held in OSS storage in London, disappeared during the transition to the newly formed CIA in 1947. Over the years, fragments of the Nightfall dossier resurfaced in unexpected places. In 1963, a CIA archivist named Harold Denton referenced Nightfall in a memo discussing classified energy recovery projects inherited from Germany. He was found dead in his Washington apartment 2 weeks later, from what was officially ruled a gas leak. The memo vanished from his office. In 1981, during a Freedom of Information Act release, a heavily redacted document labeled Project Clocktower contained a single unredacted phrase, recovered from Operation Nightfall, debris field. Anomalous radiation signatures consistent with non-standard isotope decay, declassified. OSS personnel files confirm that Major Ellison had previously served as liaison to the British Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, which coordinated post-war technology recoveries. His field reports mention close contact with British scientist Dr. Frank Whittle regarding jet propulsion systems, yet one handwritten note from February 1945 stands out. Kamler's division not working on weapons of destruction, they're chasing energy. Historians have debated its meaning, with some suggesting it referred to Nazi efforts in nuclear research, others speculating about alternative propulsion theories suppressed after the war. Local folklore in the Harz region still whispers of that night in April. Residents recall a tremor that shook the valley and a white glow that lingered for hours above the collapsed mine. Soviet troops entering the area a week later documented unusual magnetometer readings, but were ordered to seal the tunnels and withdraw. In 1952, a joint US-West German geological team attempted to reopen the site for mineral survey, but after a single descent, the project was abruptly halted. The official reason was structural instability. Unofficially, internal correspondence mentions equipment failure due to unexplained interference affecting all electronic devices below ground. One artifact connected to Nightfall eventually surfaced. In 1978, an amateur collector in Düsseldorf acquired a rusted steel case bearing the OSS insignia and a broken seal labeled Spec Recovery Hearts, 1945. Inside were fragments of thick lead, shielding, and a damaged wrist compass, its needle permanently fixed in one direction. Metallurgical testing revealed isotopic contamination consistent with uranium derivatives, yet the sample was declared non-military in origin. The collector died of leukemia 4 years later. The case was confiscated by the Bundesnachrichtendienst and has never been seen since. As late as 1999, a CIA declassification review included a single surviving memo referencing Operation Nightfall. It was marked Declassified 2045. The contents remain sealed, but handwritten in the margin beside the file code is a note believed to be added by an anonymous reviewer. Do not reopen. They found it once. No one has ever publicly confirmed what it was, or whether the Nightfall site still exists beneath the Harz Mountains, sealed under decades of earth, history, and silence. The official record concludes with a single page from the OSS War Diary, recovered from a damaged reel of microfilm stored at Fort Meade. It is dated May 9, 1945, the day after Germany's unconditional surrender. The entry reads, Nightfall team unaccounted for, site compromised. Command orders reclassification of all material under Directive 47B. Subject matter pertains to advanced energy experiments not to be disclosed under any circumstances. Beneath it, in a faint, almost erased pencil scrawl, someone wrote 2 words, they succeeded. And that is where the trail of Operation Nightfall ends. Or rather, where it was made to end. Every mention, every witness, every trace buried under the weight of secrecy. Yet the deeper one digs into post-war intelligence files, the more often one finds its shadow. The phrase Nightfall Protocol appears in Cold War briefings on nuclear containment, aerospace propulsion, and even psychological warfare programs. Its origin always traced back to that same vanished mission in the dying days of World War II. The men who went into the Harz Mountains were never seen again, but whatever they uncovered has shaped every silence that followed. Chapter 2. The Cold Silence of Station Z14. In the winter of 1951, long after the guns of Europe had fallen silent, a forgotten outpost still operated on the northern fringe of NATO's surveillance network. Known to a handful of intelligence officers as Station Z14, it was officially listed as a meteorological facility under Norwegian jurisdiction. In reality, the installation served as a remote signals intercept base, constructed with American funding under the covert directive Norsec Watchline, designed to monitor Soviet submarine communications across the Barents Sea, few outside the Allied communications. Intelligence Board even knew it existed. The station was located 70 miles north of Hammerfest, perched on a rocky plateau accessible only by airlift or snow tractor. Its permanent crew consisted of 12 operators, Norwegian technicians, British code officers, and 2 American advisors from the newly formed National Security Agency. The base functioned in near-total isolation, its only contact with the outside world through encrypted shortwave bursts, transmitted twice daily to a relay in Bodø. The logbooks recovered years later reveal that on December 3, 1951, station Z14 began receiving intermittent transmissions that did not match any known Soviet frequency. The signals were weak, distorted, and carried in bursts lasting exactly 27 seconds. The first operator to log them, Petty Officer Gunnar Haldorsen, described them as old-style German naval traffic, irregular keying, faint like an echo. At first, the assumption was technical interference, perhaps remnants of atmospheric reflection or Soviet testing of captured Enigma equipment. But when analysts examined the recording tapes, they identified unmistakable elements of the Kriegsmarine's Enigma cipher group, a system obsolete since 1945. More troubling was the transmission source. Triangulation placed it beneath the Barents Sea, approximately 120 nautical miles off Novaya Zemlya, an area devoid of known surface activity. Between December 5 and 10, additional bursts were captured, each containing segments of an older naval call sign, U-537. According to official German records, U-537 had been destroyed in November 1944 by a US Navy patrol bomber near Java, half a world away. Confusion spread through Allied intelligence circles, prompting London to issue a restricted alert under the heading Phantom Signal, Arctic. Origin, the CIA's Oslo station, reported that similar signals had been intercepted, intermittently since 1947, but were never traced to a fixed source. It was then that the Norwegian Defence Command authorized the dispatch of a special operations team, codenamed Section Greywater, to investigate. The Greywater team departed Tromsø aboard the Norwegian trawler Håkon 7 on January 14, 1952, under cover of a scientific expedition. The 7-man detachment included Captain James Alcott of the British Special Boat Service, a cryptologist named Anders Rydberg, and 2 US Navy engineers specialized in sonar mapping. They reached the designated grid 2 days later, battling severe Arctic winds and temperatures nearing -40. The sea, partially frozen, emitted faint electromagnetic fluctuations that interfered with their sonar equipment. On January 17th, the vessel recorded a metallic echo at a depth of 240 meters, a structure approximately 70 meters in length, consistent with a Type Whitesea U-boat hull. When divers descended, they found a vessel encased in ice and silt, remarkably intact. Its identification plate had been deliberately removed. The torpedo bays were empty, and the radio mast protruded slightly from the seabed. Inside the conning tower, one diver discovered something impossible: the remains of the crew seated at their stations, preserved by the freezing brine, their uniforms still bearing Kriegsmarine insignia. The U-boat's radio console was still active, powered by a humming device unlike any standard battery unit, a compact metallic cylinder with no visible wiring, emitting a faint blue luminescence. The Greywater team transmitted a short-coded message to Station Z14. Contact made. Vessel partially operational. Unidentified power source. Then communication ceased. Over the next 48 hours, Station Z14 attempted multiple call signs without response. On January 20th, a single garbled burst reached them. Fragments of Morse that translated to "not abandoned." Transmitting continues. Leave immediately. The next scheduled relay never came. A Royal Norwegian Air Force search flight dispatched from Bardufoss located no trace of the Håkon 7 or its crew. The area was later marked as a restricted maritime exclusion zone under Soviet territorial claim. For nearly 2 decades, Station Z14's files remained sealed under NATO classification. The installation itself was dismantled in 1954 following an internal directive citing budget realignment. In truth, the closure coincided with a classified inquiry by the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. An internal memo, later declassified in part, recorded the findings of an American field team sent to retrieve Greywater's remaining equipment. They located one waterlogged reel of magnetic tape inside the base's communications locker. When played back, it revealed a repeating pattern: 27 seconds of static, followed by a single word whispered through distortion. Weiter. Continue. The incident was buried under the designation Project Hephaestus, the files stored in Washington and London under joint seal. No public acknowledgement was ever made, though declassified correspondence from 1962 between the CIA and MI6 referenced the Hephaestus anomaly in connection with frozen transmission persistence. Intelligence. Officers theorized that the U-boat's radio apparatus had somehow remained in automated loop, possibly powered by a reactor or feedback device unknown to wartime German engineering. Yet, when the Soviets established a base on Novaya Zemlya for nuclear testing in the late 1950s, seismic sensors recorded irregular, magnetic pulses in the same grid where U-537 had been. Found. Eyewitness testimony from a Soviet naval engineer debriefed after defecting to the West in 1973 provided chilling corroboration. He claimed that in 1959, during preparations for the Tsar bomber test, Soviet divers recovered fragments of a metallic hull partially fused into the permafrost. The sections bore inscriptions consistent with German manufacture, though the serial numbers had been ground smooth. More curiously, the engineer described the discovery of a circular device, small as a barrel, emitting warmth despite the surrounding ice. It was confiscated by GRU officers and transported to a classified research center near Arkhangelsk. No further record of it exists. Station Z14 faded into obscurity, its existence denied even by NATO's archives. However, in 1996, a retired Norwegian telegrapher named Lars Hauge donated his private papers to the University of Oslo. Among them was a faded transcript labeled Z14 Signal Log. The final entry, dated February 4, 1952, reads, "Transmission detected at 2300 hours. Frequency identical to original. Coordinates unchanged. Source depth 238 meters. Message fragment in Old German cipher. Wir halten Position. Nicht vergessen. We hold position. Do not forget." Modern analysis of the recording indicates the signal was genuine, not an echo or interference. Its power source remains unexplained, as the specific frequency and modulation could not have persisted unaided for years. Some theorists suggest the submerged reactor continued operating autonomously, feeding bursts of residual energy through the decaying transmitter. Others claim the signal was a Soviet forgery intended to disorient NATO intelligence. Yet the raw data reveals an anomaly impossible to dismiss. The exact same Morse irregularities recorded in 1951 were still present in the 1952 burst. As if the same hand, the same machine, was transmitting from beneath the ice long after all aboard were dead. No official inquiry has revisited the incident. The coordinates remain restricted in both Russian and NATO naval charts. A joint maritime expedition in 2008 attempted to map the region, but was forced to withdraw when their sonar arrays malfunctioned within minutes of approaching the grid. Their report concluded with a note eerily similar to that found in Station Z14's final file. Unknown electromagnetic interference. Origin undetermined. What began as a meteorological station on the edge of the Arctic became a whisper buried in static, a fragment of a war that refused to die. Somewhere beneath the frozen sea, the ghosts of a forgotten frequency continue to send their message into the silence. We hold position. Do not forget. Chapter 3. Shadows over Peenemünde. In the closing weeks of April 1945, as Allied troops poured into the heart of Germany, British and American intelligence raced to secure remnants of the Third Reich's most advanced weapons programs. Among these, Peenemünde, the Baltic coastal testing site of the V-2 rocket, was regarded as the crown jewel. But while the public record celebrates Operation Paperclip's recruitment of German scientists, a second, darker mission ran parallel to it, one that would never be officially acknowledged. Its codename was Operation Eclipse. Eclipse was authorized by the Anglo-American Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, CIOS, in March 1945 under Directive CIOS 109B. Unlike Paperclip, which sought technological expertise, Eclipse was tasked with locating experimental medical and propulsion research believed too sensitive for public record. Command was assigned to Colonel William Wainwright, a British intelligence officer attached to the Ministry of Supply, with liaison support from OSS agent Captain Daniel Hughes. The mission's objective: secure or destroy any documentation from Peenemünde's underground laboratories before Soviet forces reach the coast. The first Eclipse team arrived on May 2, 1945. According to the field log recovered years later, they found Peenemünde largely deserted. Workshops stripped, instruments smashed, file cabinets burned. Only the skeletal remains of the test stand still jutted from the dunes, silent monuments to a vanished program. Yet something about the destruction seemed deliberate, systematic. Wainwright noted in his personal journal that files were not looted, but excised, removed cleanly, as if by those who knew exactly what to take. Nearby villagers reported that 3 nights earlier, trucks bearing SS insignia had departed the facility toward the coastline under heavy guard. Inside the ruins of the assembly hall, the team found fragments of a coded manifest stamped Reichsluftfahrtministerium, Sector 9B. The accompanying line item was illegible except for 2 words, Biologische Versuchsreihen, biological test series. The entry was signed by an engineer known only by initials HK, almost certainly Hans Kammler, the shadowy SS general whose disappearance at the end of the war remains one of its greatest enigmas. Wainwright immediately ordered a sweep of the surrounding coastline, suspecting a secondary installation. Locals directed them toward an abandoned mineshaft 2 kilometers west of the test center. Sealed with concrete and marked Betreten Verboten, inside, they discovered a hidden corridor descending more than 60 meters into the ground. The tunnel walls were lined with power conduits and rusted ventilation shafts. At the lowest level, the team encountered several sealed doors labeled Proofstand 13. What lay beyond is known only through Wainwright's brief, handwritten account found decades later in his estate. No rocket components, he wrote. No fuel cells. Only surgical tables, restraints, and circular apparatus resembling centrifuges. Power generators still warm. Evidence of hasty evacuation. Instruments unfamiliar, possibly biological in application. Photographic. Negatives recovered from his camera were destroyed during development by what technicians described as chemical corruption. Only 1 frame survived. A blurred image of a cylindrical chamber surrounded by cables. Scrawled across the negative's edge, in Wainwright's own hand, was the phrase Subject 0. That photograph, later sealed within MI6 archives, would become the centerpiece of speculation around Eclipse. In July 1945, before the Potsdam Conference, the British quietly transferred remaining Peenemünde materials to a temporary facility near Lüneburg, codenamed Depot B11. US liaison reports indicate that OSS representatives were denied entry. When American intelligence finally gained access 2 months later, all documents had been removed. The depot was empty, except for a single storage crate containing glass ampules labeled Kontaminationsproben, nicht öffnen. The crate was incinerated on orders from the US Army Medical Research Division. No analysis was recorded. By 1947, Eclipse had been dissolved, its files absorbed into the newly formed British Atomic Weapons Research Establishment. Yet references persisted in marginalia and briefing papers. In one declassified memo from the Ministry of Defense dated August 1951, a line reads, Eclipse subfile, 9B material unsuitable for reproduction. Origin, Peenemünde, Kammler, biological propulsion. The term biological propulsion puzzled historians until a 1984 release of declassified V2 blueprints revealed sketches for gyroscopic stabilization systems based on neural reflex models, mechanisms designed to mimic living tissue response patterns. It appeared that, in their desperation, Nazi engineers had begun merging biology and mechanics in search of control systems for their rockets. Not all witnesses survived to tell what they saw. Sergeant Alan McKinley, Wainwright's radio operator, disappeared in 1948 after being recalled to London for debriefing. His wife received a telegram stating only that he had transferred to civil service abroad. In 1967, his name surfaced again in a CIA personnel database under a false identity attached to a classified project titled Eclipse Reverb. The entry was deleted shortly thereafter. In 1956, a Royal Air Force film archivist cataloguing unused reconnaissance footage from 1945 stumbled upon a short reel labeled Peenemünde South, Recovery Detail. The footage begins conventionally, showing Allied soldiers examining rocket debris, but near its end, the camera pans across a table bearing burned documents. For a single second, barely a frame, a visible heading reads, Untersektor 9B, Protocol. Cognition's experiment. Cognitive experiments. The reel cuts abruptly, mid-movement, as if intentionally stopped. Within a week of its discovery, the film was confiscated by the Ministry of Defense and officially destroyed due to decomposition. The archivist was reassigned to Cyprus and never commented publicly. What remains of Operation Eclipse is fragmentary: a handful of field notes, 3 coded telegrams, and 1 surviving inventory sheet dated May 4, 1945. That sheet lists 22 specimens transported from Peenemünde to an unknown location along the Baltic coast under the Designation Transportgruppe Theta. No Allied intelligence report ever recorded their interception. Some researchers believe the convoy merged with evacuation routes headed for the port of Kiel, where it vanished amidst the chaos of surrender. Others suggest it reached a submarine depot in Poland and escaped across the Baltic. A Cold War intercept from 1959 lends weight to the latter theory. The message, decrypted by GCHQ from a Soviet naval communication, references prior German biological systems recovered from Baltic seabed, coordinates withheld, transferred to Arkhangelsk facility. The cryptographic header matches an earlier Soviet file concerning the recovery of experimental material from the Barents, the same region later associated with the U-boat anomaly of Station Z14. Different incidents, decades apart, bound by an invisible thread. By the time the Berlin Wall rose, Eclipse had become a myth whispered among intelligence historians, a phantom operation whose traces were erased as carefully as they were made. Yet in 1992, a retired British clerk named Margaret Havers donated a box of papers to the Imperial War Museum. Among them was an envelope marked Eclipse Personal Copy. Inside lay a single page typed on thin wartime paper. It read, Directive 9B suspended. Transfer complete. London requests silence. The American contingent unaware. Biological propulsion achieved partial success. Subject mortality high. Further experimentation relocated. Destination classified. Signed only W. Whether W was Wainwright or someone higher remains uncertain. But the last sentence of that page echoes through every file that followed the trail of Eclipse. We did not win Peenemünde. We inherited it. Whatever was found in those underground corridors, whatever escaped the ruins of the Reich's rocket program, shaped the hidden front of the post-war world. The rockets that reached the stars were built on knowledge no one wished to claim, and the silence that covered Peenemünde was not ignorance, it was fear. Chapter 4: The Prague Decryption. In November 1989, as crowds filled Wenceslas Square and the Iron Curtain cracked, a team of archivists working inside the crumbling headquarters of the Czechoslovak State Security Service, the STB, uncovered a sealed basement chamber marked Restricted, Case 47 Theta. Behind the steel door lay dozens of boxes, sealed with wax and coated in decades of dust. Inside were reels of microfilm, carbon copies of telegrams, and cipher logs dating from the final months of the Second World War. Many bore both Nazi and Allied letterheads, an impossibility that confounded historians. The centerpiece of the discovery, however, was a series of decrypted communications between SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler and unidentified Allied intermediaries. The implication was staggering. In the dying weeks of the war, an exchange had taken place, not of surrender, but of technology. Each transmission was dated between March and May 1945 and carried the header, Project Obsidian. The content, partially decoded using a cipher unique to the Reich Main Security Office, included references to controlled detonation pathways, transport via diplomatic channels, and the phrase, mutual advancement beyond conventional theatre. Analysts noted that one of the Allied codenames, Sable, appeared in both American and British wartime correspondence linked to experimental power research. The messages hinted at negotiations conducted through neutral intermediaries in Switzerland and Sweden. The STB records suggested that these communications were intercepted by Czech resistance operatives, then buried during the communist takeover in 1948 to avoid Soviet confiscation. One reel, labelled Prague Transmission, April 29, 1945, contained an audio recording of a radio exchange in heavily coded English and German. The voices are distorted, but the transcript reads, German voice. Kammler confirmed exchange parameters. Coordinates established. Authorization via London channel. English voice. Verification pending. Technology secured upon delivery. Repeat, secured upon delivery. German voice. We agree. Prototype transferred at Point Obsidian. The line ends abruptly. The Seat B's accompanying notes list a location near the village of Terezín, 20 miles north of Prague, once home to a military transit depot commandeered by the SS. In early 1990, NATO's post-communist advisory mission dispatched investigators to the coordinates. They found the remnants of a fortified bunker network buried beneath the former depot, the entrance sealed with poured concrete. When ground-penetrating radar was used to scan the subsurface, the instruments registered an empty cavity stretching at least 50 meters below ground. Attempts to drill were abandoned after sensors detected unusually high radiation levels. Officially, the report attributed it to natural uranium deposits. Unofficially, a classified annex mentioned evidence of underground detonation inconsistent with wartime ordnance. Among the declassified Prague decryption files, one document stands out, an English-language memorandum dated May 7, 1945, bearing the letterhead of the British War Cabinet. The text is brief, almost perfunctory. Subject: Protocol Obsidian. Transfer acknowledged. Asset retrieval under consideration. No further correspondence. Beneath it, handwritten in blue pencil, are two words: delivered intact. The file was stamped secret and filed under an internal code shared with the Manhattan district. Though no direct connection has ever been proven, the timeline aligns eerily with the earliest planning of post-war atomic cooperation between the US and UK researchers analyzing the Seat B's archive noted discrepancies in the encryption method. While German Enigma codes typically followed rigid rotor patterns, the Obsidian ciphers employed a modified 5-rotor sequence with British naval signal markers embedded. It suggested dual authorship or collaboration. Further anomalies included the use of Allied military time notation rather than German. These inconsistencies implied that the communications were not merely intercepted, but deliberately constructed for mutual recognition. The question remained: what was being exchanged? Surviving Czech testimonies from resistance fighters describe an unusual convoy departing Prague on May 3, 1945, escorted by both SS and Wehrmacht officers. The trucks bore no markings except a black triangle painted on their doors. One witness, an elderly railway worker interviewed in 1991, recalled that the convoy's cargo was a crate the size of a coffin, heavily shielded, guarded like gold. The trucks never reached their destination. Records from the Soviet First Ukrainian Front mention an explosion near Neratovice that night, described as a blast of blinding white light. The Soviets sealed the area for 3 days and recovered nothing but melted metal fragments. Yet, curiously, there is no mention of this event in any official Soviet after-action report. In 1991, when Western analysts reviewed the Prague files, one discovery unsettled even seasoned historians. A carbon copy of a decrypted Allied signal from Bletchley Park, dated May 6, 1945. It reads: Obsidian channel terminated. Data transfer complete. Destroy encryption matrices. Political sensitivity extreme. The signal's authenticity was verified through its unique format identification, yet no record of such a communication exists in British archives. Every request for cross-reference under the Freedom of Information Act returned the same phrase: material withheld for reasons of national security. The Prague decryption files also included a half-burned letter written in German, unsigned but likely authored by Kammler himself. The surviving portion reads, "The agreement is sealed. They will preserve the work where we cannot. What matters is continuity. We do not vanish. We adapt." The remainder of the page is charred beyond recognition. Forensic dating placed the paper stock's manufacture in late 1944, consistent with SS stationery from Kammler's office in Ebensee. After the fall of the communist regime, the files were transferred to the new Czech Ministry of Defense for cataloguing. Within months, several boxes disappeared. When an investigative journalist from Respect magazine attempted to trace them in 1993, he received a letter warning him to cease inquiries for his own safety. He was later found dead in his Prague apartment, officially ruled suicide. The missing boxes have never resurfaced, though former STB officers claim they were retrieved by Western intelligence during the chaotic handover of power. In 2006, a NATO declassification board released a single document referencing the case under a different name, Directive Theta. The text was minimal, a one-page summary acknowledging that the obsidian transmissions represented a channel of strategic value between Allied and Axis elements during the transitional period of hostilities. It closed with an instruction: no further analysis to be made public. The enduring mystery of the Prague decryption lies not only in the evidence of secret negotiations, but in the implication that both sides, victor and defeated, shared a common purpose hidden beneath ideological conflict. The transfer, whatever it was, took place in the final hours of the war, as governments crumbled and loyalties dissolved. Whether it was technology, information, or something far more consequential remains unknown. The final reel recovered from the Sebi vault, dated May 10, 1945, contains a brief audio fragment. A voice, in perfect English, speaks a single sentence before the tape cuts out. "We delivered as promised." No agency has ever identified the speaker, and no existing transcript references the line again. The phrase remains the last verifiable link in a chain of evidence stretching from Peenemünde to Prague, proof that in the smoke-filled twilight of the war, the boundaries between enemy and ally blurred into something unrecognizable. Perhaps the war's true conclusion was not signed in Berlin, but whispered in cipher beneath a city already preparing to forget. Chapter 5: The Siberian Relic Files. In the bleak winter of 1953, as Joseph Stalin's health declined and paranoia consumed the Soviet state, an unpublicized order circulated through the corridors of the main intelligence directorate, GRU Directive 0127P. Its purpose was obscure, its classification absolute. The directive commanded the immediate retrieval of foreign relic assets buried in the Siberian interior, designated post-1944 acquisition, high strategic value. The mission was entrusted to Colonel Viktor Anisimov, a decorated veteran of the Eastern Front and a man with a reputation for discretion. Officially, he was head of the 12th Directorate of Military Engineering. Unofficially, he was the Kremlin's custodian of secrets too dangerous to record. Anisimov's journey began in Moscow on February 9, 1953. Accompanying him were 9 specialists, geologists, cryptographers, and 1 physicist from the Kurchatov Institute, Dr. Irina Kladova. Their route, traced through fragments of declassified railway manifests, led east to Novosibirsk and then north by convoy into the Tunguska Basin, the same region devastated by a mysterious explosion in 1908. The operation was conducted under the guise of a geological survey, using equipment marked with Ministry of Natural Resources insignia. Their true destination, coordinates 65 and 101-47E, was classified as Sector 74, a zone that had been closed to all civilian access since 1944. The Soviet archives are silent on who identified the location, but Anisimov's private field notes, recovered decades later, reveal a clue. He refers repeatedly to German documentation recovered from Königsberg, 1945. Those documents, seized by Soviet forces during the capture of East Prussia, included references to Project Morgenrot, Project Dawn, a Reich program investigating anomalous magnetic fields detected in Siberia during the late 1930s. Kammler's name appeared again, alongside Wehrmacht geophysical surveys, suggesting that a metallic anomaly lay buried beneath Tunguska's frozen soil. The Nazis had apparently planned an expedition to retrieve it, but abandoned the effort as the war turned against them. Anisimov, following the thread, intended to complete their work. On March 2nd, the team reached the coordinates after a grueling trek through permafrost and forest. The first entry in Anisimov's recovered journal describes their discovery. "We found the depression, a shallow crater, not natural. Instruments react violently, compass needles spin, metal detectors overload." Beneath the ice, the team uncovered fragments of metal unlike any known Soviet alloy, seamless, non-corroding, and slightly warm to the touch despite the sub-zero temperature. They excavated deeper, uncovering a structure resembling a half-buried dome approximately 20 meters in diameter. Radiation counters registered mild fluctuations, though not consistent with known fission sources. Dr. Kladova's initial analysis, recorded on a salvaged dictation cylinder, described the metal as pre-war manufacture impossible to identify, magnetic properties non-Euclidean in configuration. Her tone, steady at first, breaks halfway through. The object, it reacts to light. It hums when exposed to direct beam. I advise halting excavation until further study. That recording, preserved in the KGB's Special Storage Archive until the late 1980s, ends abruptly with a faint echo, a rhythmic clicking sound that analysts later compared to pulse patterns recorded in nuclear reactors. The official mission log ends on March 9th. The final entry, penned by Anisimov himself, reads, "The object is not of German origin, not man-made by any known process. Orders from Moscow unclear, extraction or destruction, awaiting confirmation, weather worsening, morale unstable." After that date, all communication ceased. A week later, a military recovery convoy sent from Krasnoyarsk arrived to find the base abandoned, tents shredded, equipment frozen in place. The excavation pit had collapsed inward, forming a smooth concave depression as if the ground had melted. Of the 10-person team, none were found. Only Anisimov's notebook and a twisted fragment of the metallic dome remained. The Soviet state classified the incident immediately. Directive 0127P was reissued under the new label State Security Level Omega. All physical evidence was transported to an underground facility near Omsk, later absorbed into the KGB's Directorate Fee Research Division. Internal memoranda from 1954 refer to the material as Relic Type A. According to one declassified inventory sheet discovered after the USSR's collapse, the Omsk facility stored exactly 27 kilograms of non-reactive composite, unidentified lattice structure. Testing reportedly ceased after multiple technicians suffered acute radiation sickness without measurable exposure. The remaining samples were sealed in lead containers and relocated to an undisclosed site in Kazakhstan by 1961. For nearly 40 years, the incident remained buried under layers of bureaucracy and myth. But in 1992, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, fragments of Anisimov's original field journal surfaced on the black market in Novosibirsk. The pages, smuggled out by former KGB archivists, describe the final hours of the expedition in haunting detail. One passage reads, "Kladova claims the artifact is listening. When we speak near it, the surface vibrates, faintly mirroring our words. I fear we have awakened something dormant. Orders from Moscow, retrieve core sample. She refuses, says it cannot be divided." The next line is scrawled hurriedly, almost illegible. It began to glow. Eyewitness rumors collected in the 1990s among Siberian villagers near the old Sector 74 site tell of an immense flash seen in the sky around. March 10, 1953, a light so bright it turned the snow blue. No official Soviet meteorological records mention such an event. However, seismic data from the Irkutsk Institute registered a minor tremor in that region at 23:47 local time. Within 48 hours, Moscow declared the area off-limits due to chemical contamination. It would remain restricted for the next 4 decades. Dr. Kladova's name vanished from academic rosters after 1953. Her personnel file at the Kurchatov Institute lists her as transferred to closed city. Alzheimer's 16, a euphemism for classified assignment, yet no further records exist. In 1971, an internal KGB memo referencing Relic Type A reactivation tests lists a consultant by initials IK, working under the supervision of nuclear physicist Andrei Sakharov. The note concludes with the cryptic remark, "Response incomplete, containment successful, subject terminated voluntarily." If IK was indeed Kladova, her fate was sealed by the same discovery she had warned against nearly 20 years earlier. By the time Western intelligence caught wind of Directive 0127P, the Cold War was nearing its end. CIA reconnaissance satellites photographed the Tunguska site in 1985, revealing a perfectly circular depression still visible after 3 decades. Thermal imaging showed minor heat signatures along its perimeter despite the frozen terrain. Analysts dismissed it as residual geological activity, though internal memoranda acknowledged possible anomalous energy discharge. No public acknowledgement was ever made. In 1998, a joint Russian-American expedition attempted to re-examine the Tunguska Basin using ground radar. Their results were never officially published, but an engineer involved leaked a single scan showing a faint, dome-like outline at approximately the same coordinates recorded by Anisimov in 1953. The accompanying commentary, later circulated among geophysicists, ends with a chilling note. No echo returned from interior. Material absorbs signal entirely. The team's funding was abruptly withdrawn before they could continue. The final known artifact connected to the Siberian relic files appeared in 2011, when a metal fragment matching the Omsk composite description was sold anonymously at an auction in Munich. The seller, a former Soviet technician, claimed it originated from the 1953 operation in the north. Laboratory analysis revealed an alloy composition inconsistent with any recorded in metallurgy databases. A lattice of nickel, titanium, and an unidentified element producing spontaneous thermal energy when exposed to oxygen. Within days of the analysis, the fragment was confiscated by Russian security agents. The buyer, a British historian named Peter Hale, disappeared 2 months later while traveling in Ulaanbaatar. His remains were never found. Today, the official record of Directive URA 127P remains sealed under Russian state secrecy law. The surviving pages of Anisimov's journal, held by private collectors, end with an unfinished sentence. It was not theirs, and it was never gone. Whether he meant the artifact predated the war or humanity itself remains open to interpretation. Yet across scattered documents, from Kamla's projects in Königsberg to Soviet recovery efforts in Tunguska, a single pattern emerges, an unbroken chain of obsession stretching from the final days of the Reich to the paranoid heart of the Cold War, whatever lay buried beneath. Siberia's ice was powerful enough to unite the ambitions of enemies and silence the testimony of those who found it. The Siberian relic files were not just the record of a lost expedition. They were the closing chapter in a story that began long before the first shot of the Second World War. A story written in metal, secrecy, and fear that still hums beneath the frozen earth. For nearly a century, fragments of war have bled into rumor and rumor into silence. The archives of Europe and the ruins beneath Siberia share one thread, a persistence of secrecy stronger than ideology, nation, or time. Files are missing, names redacted, transmissions erased, yet traces remain like echoes that refuse to fade. What vanished with Kamla's last convoy? What was delivered beneath Prague? And what now lies sealed under ice, all converge toward the same shadow. Perhaps the war never truly ended. It only changed its theater, shifting underground, into the hands of those who learned that knowledge is a weapon no treaty can contain. And somewhere, in an unmarked facility or a forgotten vault, the hum of that weapon may still be waiting, dormant, patient, and unaccounted for.